So you want to learn how to make these awesome 3D UI scenes in After Effects. In this video, we'll show you a few different ways to do it. First, we'll build a 3D UI scene right inside of After Effects. No plugins required. Next, we'll make a cool credit card scene using Figma and After Effects. And then, we'll create a Microsoft style scene using our free Photoshop project file that we will animate in After Effects. By the end, you will learn many great techniques, so make sure to stick around. If you want to follow along, I left all the materials I use in this video in our Discord server, so make sure to download it. I will also leave a free plugin in the folder, but more on that later on. Now that you know that, let's start with the first scene. Let's create a new comp by going to Composition and then New Comp. I will type in 1920 by 1080, 3-second duration and 23 FPS. Let's start by creating 3D rings. So how can we make a circle shape? Let's go to the Shape tool and click Q twice on our keyboard. This will select the ellipse tool and now we can create a shape. But as you can see, this isn't the best circle. So how can we create a perfect circle instead? To do that, we'll hold shift while creating the shape. That's a lot better. But we want the stroke only. So let's disable the fill by selecting the shape, then clicking the fill text right here. We will pick none in the fill options menu and then click OK. Let's also enable stroke and increase it to 2. The color doesn't matter, so I will leave it at white. We have this cool stroke circle, but we need to make it 3D. So how can we extrude the shape? Let's make our shape 3D by clicking the cube icon. If you don't see it, toggle modes with this button below and then you'll see it. And also, make sure you have the advanced 3D selected instead of the classic one. Classic 3D is good for animating, but we can't edit geometry with it. As you can see, we have way more options for our shape now. Let's open the geometry settings. We want to set the bevel style to convex, then set the bevel depth to around 100. We got a 3D ring model now, but the material sucks. So to fix it, let's open the material settings. I will set the intensity to max and shininess to 75. The ring looks good, so now we need to animate it. Let's add keyframes for X rotation, Y rotation and Z rotation. But before we animate it, we must make sure our anchor point is in the middle so that it rotates correctly. Let's right click our shape, go to transform and then center the anchor point. Now when you rotate it, we will see that it's centered. Let's add 3 keyframes at the end as well and start changing values. At the beginning, we will put X rotation at -35, Y rotation at 15 and Z rotation at -20. And on the end keyframes, I will only edit the Z rotation. Let's set it at -35. I will also add a keyframe for orientation and set it to 350 at the beginning. Now that we completed the animation, we want to add the texture as well. So how can we get that beautiful texture like in the preview? Let's pre-compose a ring and name it something like ring texture. First thing I'm going to do is add a CC hair effect to it. This may look weird, but we'll make it way better with a few tweaks. Let's decrease the length to 0. And then bump up the density to a big number like 3000. It looks better, but it lacks some detail. So let's open the hair from map settings and set the strength to -150. I will also decrease the softness to 15. And now we got this amazing looking texture, but it's not done yet. We want to make it that beautiful white color. We will do that with the tritone effect, so let's apply it to our layer. Let's set the highlights and midtones color to white. We got this weird metal look, but we don't want that. To fix it, let's set the shadow color to something between pink and red. Then pick a darker color to get this cool white with a shade of purple. Or copy my code below. Now this already looks good, but I will add one more effect to make it more glossy. It's called CC Glass. This effect has a lot of settings, but we'll only edit the main 3. I'll bump the softness to 45 and height to 20, displacement to 500, and with that we completed our ring. Now we want to set the scene up. I love to use grids so I can be more precise. Let's use a proportional grid. This may be a bit confusing to some people, but you can copy what I'm doing visually. There's not an exact formula on how to set up your scene, so do whatever fits and adjust it until it looks right. I will decrease the scale a bit and move it down. When you set up the first ring, let's duplicate it by clicking Ctrl D and let's move it up. We want it to be opposite of the first ring, but not perfectly aligned. Sometimes having an imperfect setup can turn out better, and that's why I'm also going to scale down the second ring and rotate it a bit to get a different look. Once done, let's duplicate it one more time, scale it up back again and put it on the top left. Let's repeat that and put another ring on the bottom as well. We can turn off the grid for now. Let's also label the rings a different color so we can tell them apart later on. And with that, we set up the rings. The next thing we need to do is turn this boring black background into a cool gradient. We will do this easily with a method I've been using for a long time. I'm going to add a leaf picture and then add some effects and make it a gradient. Let's go to pexels.com and look for a plant image. All of these are completely copyright free, so we can use them. Something like this is what we want. Let's download it and import it into our timeline. I will put it behind the rings. Let's scale it down because it's 4K. Around 50 is good. Then let's rotate it by 90 degrees so it fills the whole background. Now to get a gradient, we will add a Gaussian blur effect. We want to bump it to a big number like 500 to make sure it looks good. This is okay, but not the color we want. Let's use Triton once again. We will set the highlights to white, midtones to this blue color shown on the screen. You can copy the code. And the shadow color to this gray. Copy the code on this one too. This method is really simple, but the results never disappoint. We will blend everything with color grading, but more on that later. Let's create our card first. We will navigate to the shape tool and click Q until we get the rectangle shape. Let's enable the fill by clicking the fill text and then selecting solid color. You can pick white as the background color. And let's disable the stroke. Now you need to draw a shape over your scene. This doesn't need to be exact like mine, but if you want to copy, here's a screenshot so you can see the exact positions on the grid. Let's align the shape at the center using the align panel. Now that we have our shape, let's decompose it and work on it inside the comp. But first, I will label it a different color so we don't get confused later on. And also, let's put the right ring above our shape. This will be important later on. Now let's open the comp. The first thing we want to do is make the shape round. Let's open the rectangle path and increase the roundness to 20. Before we do anything else, let's duplicate the shape and turn it off for now. We'll come back to this later on. Let's go back to the bottom shape and add a gradient ramp effect. I will set the ramp shape to a radial ramp. Let's also set the start of ramp's second value to 500 to bring it closer to the shape center. Then let's edit the colors. We want a white color with shades of blue for the start color. You can copy my code here. For the end color, we want the same thing, but even whiter. This is the second code. Then let's increase the ramp scatter to 40 and blend it with the background at around 60%. Now we've got this cool shade, but it's not enough. Let's add a setting by right-clicking the layer, Layer Styles, Setting. Then we'll open the settings and edit a few things. I'll set the color to this cool gray shade. You can copy the code here. Let's set the angles at 25 degrees, increase the distance to around 140 and size to around 180 and leave the invert on. That's it for the main card. Now let's create another rectangle shape for the bottom card. You don't have to worry about bounds in this one. Just draw it over like this and you'll be good to go. The only thing we're going to do is edit the color in this shape. Copy my code right here. And let's also set the opacity to 50%. Now to fix the shape going out of bounds, let's turn the top shape on and set the blending mode to stencil alpha. We'll toggle modes and find it here. Now it won't go beyond the shape. But make sure every time you make adjustments to the size or roundness of the bottom shape, you also apply it to this one, or you will have problems with the border. It's time we start adding the card elements. If you want the exact results as me, I'll leave this card as a PNG in my Discord server, so you can use it as an overlay and create elements over it. Let's turn on the proportional grid again and start adding text. I'm using SF Pro font for this scene. These are my settings, so copy them if you want. Let's start typing. You can type whatever, but I wanted to include the day numbers as shown in the example. So let's type the number 11, scale it down and position it around here. Then the number 15 in the middle, and then the number 19 on the right side of the card. We only need to add 13 and 17 between these numbers, and we completed the bottom bar. So let's move on to the top bar. We want to create this thin line, and that will be super easy to do. Let's create a shape like this using the rectangle tool, then open the rectangle path settings and unlink the size property. We'll decrease the second value to something really small like 1 or 2. Let's set the shape color to black and lower the opacity to 15%. That's it for the line. For the text, let's copy the text layer for the bottom and then type in weekly and set the color to a gray shade. You can copy my code here. That's it for the top bar. Everything that's left is the main part of the card. We'll copy the weekly text and type in $, and whatever number you want. Then I will set its color to black and also make it bolder. Then I will scale it up, align it using the align panel, and position it manually until I like how it looks. Before animating it, let's give it some color. We will use a gradient ramp effect. Set the top color to black and bottom color to gray with this code. Set the start color on the $ symbol and the gray one completely to the right. We got this cool gradient now, so it's time to animate next. Let's add a slider control effect on our text layer. Then open the text layer, text, and then select the pick tool and connect the source text to the slider control and type in this expression. I'll leave it in the description for you to copy. Then let's type the same value from before. Now we can animate this number as you like. I will add a keyframe at 2-second mark and one at the beginning. Then set the value at the beginning keyframe at around 178. Now we have this animated counter, but let's also animate the text going up in a cool, modern UI way. Let's expand the layer options, add opacity and position from the animator menu, set the opacity to 0 and position to +100, then open the range selector and then advanced. Put shape to ramp up, Set easy high to -50 and easy low to 100. Then finally, you want to animate it going from -50 to +100. Then you can move the keyframes a bit to the right until you like how it looks. And also, I made a mistake here. You want units to be characters and not words. That's it for the main text. Let's duplicate the weekly text once more and place it under the money text. Then type whatever. I'll do something like +98 compared to the last week. And then align it. Perfect. The only thing we have left is the graph. It consists of 3 parts. Blue line, gray line, and the dot. Let's make them one by one. I will start with the blue line. Let's use the pen tool. Make sure your fill is off and your stroke is set to 6 pixels. To make it curve, hold shift while creating a dot and then drag it. This may seem hard for beginners, but it's easy once you get the hang of it. And also, always make sure the stencil alpha layer is on top so nothing can go above it. When you draw a line you're satisfied with, let's set the color to what we want. I use this cool blue. Here's the code. Let's duplicate the line once more and set its color to gray. Then pre-compose the gray line and put it above the blue one. Now we will select a pen tool and draw a shape at the half like this. It's used to animate the graph progressing. Click M to open the mask settings. Let's add a keyframe for mask path at the beginning and another one until the number stops counting, so around here. Leave the first keyframe as it is and then go to the end keyframe and move the shape points a bit to the right. This will animate the blue shape progressing. Lastly, we need the dot. Let's go to the shape tool and click Q to get the ellipse tool. Then hold shift and create a perfect circle. We'll turn the fill back on and its color to white. And we'll leave the stroke at 6 with the same color as the line. Now we must scale the dot so it's not so big. Now let's add position keyframes on the dot. We want to add one each time our dot comes to a curve point. Once we do that, we can move it around and we have a perfect graph animation. This process may be confusing to some beginners, but follow me and it will end up good. If you did everything right, it should look something like this. One last detail for the card is this big line in the background. To create it, we'll duplicate our blue shape layer. Let's set the stroke to 100 and the color to gray using this code. Then decrease the opacity to 30%. Then rotate it to like 15 degrees. That looks great. We can leave the card comp now. One last effect is a drop shadow for the card. Let's apply the effect with these settings. Opacity 15%, direction 150 degrees, distance 150, softness 500. We finally completed the card. But if you look closer, this right ring lacks shadow as well. Let's add a drop shadow once again. We'll set the opacity to 10, direction to plus 200 degrees, distance to 50, and softness to 200. Now we got this cool shadow on the card as well. We just completed the design for the scene. And now we only need to animate it and add some extra effects. Let's add a null layer above our scene. We will link all properties to it except the background. Now we can animate the scene by adding a scale keyframe on the null. Let's set the value for the first keyframe at 108 and then create another one at the end and type 100. This will add a slow zoom out effect. So let's add another null layer and link the first null to it. Then let's add 2 scale keyframes, one at the beginning and the second at around 1 second mark. I will increase the value on the first keyframe to around 150. Let's select them and press F9 to ease ease and then open the graph editor. I will use the value graph and make a fast one like this. Now we got a zoom at the beginning as well. The only thing left on the card is to make it move in 3D space. Let's make it 3D by clicking the cube icon, but this time we want to set the 3D renderer to classic 3D. It won't mess with our lighting in this composition, so we can only focus on animating. Let's add 2 keyframes for the exportation. I want it animating the whole scene, so I will add one at the start and one at the end. Let's set the value on the first keyframe to something like -35 and leave the last one at 0. That's it for the animation. Now we only want to make the scene look better with 3 quick effects. Let's make an adjustment layer by going to Layer, New, Adjustment Layer. Now duplicate it twice, and then we want to label them a different color to tell them apart. First one will be a blur mask. We will apply a Gaussian blur effect. Let's set the blurriness to 35 and then leave the rest as it is. Then we want to create a mask using the ellipse tool. Click Q until you have it selected. Then select the first adjustment layer and draw an ellipse over the scene. Now we need to open the layer settings and click on inverted, so it affects only the edges. Let's also increase the feather to around 150 so it's not so rough. This looks great. Now let's add color grading so our scene blends more. We will add the lumetri color effect on the second layer. We only care about the creative section, so let's close the other stuff. There's a lot of presets here, so go with whatever you like. I will use the blue steel preset. Let's also lower the intensity to like 60. And lastly, we want a blur transition at the beginning. To do that, let's add a fast box blur effect on the third adjustment layer. Add 2 keyframes, one at the start and one at 20 frames. and then set the first keyframe's value at 4. And with that, we created this cool UI scene completely inside of After Effects. Let me know if you want to see more scenes like this. But now, let's move on to the next scene. We made a cool looking UI. So now, let's make a scene that's more 3D. I'm going to start by creating a new composition. Let's go to Composition, New Comp, 1920 by 1080, 23 frame rate, and 4-second duration. In this scene, I will start by gathering card designs. I have them split up between background cards and the main card. Let's start with the main 3D card. We're going to use sketchfab.com for that. Let's look up a credit card. I'm going to check downloadable. I went with the first one that came up, but you guys can find the one you like. Make sure you're allowed to use it. All credits for this card go to this person. Okay, let's download it by clicking the Download 3D Model button. Make sure you get the .glb format and go with the highest texture possible. Now that we installed it, let's import it into our timeline. I will also scale the object down to 20%. Now we need to rotate it and position it at the center of the screen. But before we do that, let's enter anchor point of the card by right-clicking it, going to Transform, then selecting the center anchor point in Layer Content. Now we can click W on our keyboard to open the rotation tool, hold it and then swipe to rotate the card. And then you can position it at the center. I will also scale it down a bit more, around 70%. Now it's aligned at the center. But we also want to disable the lights on it, so let's open the composition options and turn Accepts Lights off. Now we have a cool looking card. Then let's animate it by adding keyframes for Y and Z rotation. Keep in mind that with this GLB model, the coordinate system is different, so the X, Y and Z values are different from what they usually are like in After Effects. If you use another model, you'd edit the X and Y rotation instead. Let's add keyframes at the beginning and at the end. I will type plus 25 at the first Y keyframe and minus 10 for the Z one. Let's leave the end keyframes at 0. Now that looks great. Now we want to make the cursor animation. I left the PNG in the folder, so join the Discord if you want to get it. Let's import it and scale it down to around 30. I'm going to add two keyframes, one at the 2-second mark and one around 10th frame mark. Let's move it out of the bounds at the first keyframe and place it on the card in the second. Let's select the keyframes, press F9 to easy ease and open the graph editor. I'll use the speed graph. Your graph should look something like this. You can copy mine. This looks awesome. To complete this animation, let's add a scale keyframe on the card when the mouse goes over it. So right around here. I'm going to move a few frames, then increase the scale to 72. This looks awesome. Now let's move on the background cards. They can be 2D, so we're going to use Figma for these. Let's open up Figma on our browser. Make an account if you don't have one and switch to the Community tab on the left. Now we can look up some credit card templates. I found this one, but there's many great templates, so anything can work. It's called Credit Card 1.0. Let's click on it, and now we can open it in Figma. To actually see the cards, we must switch the tab here to Cards, and then we can find the cards we like the most. I will pick these four. To download the card, let's select it, and then we will scroll to the bottom and expand the export settings. And now we can click on the export button and we'll download the file. And let's repeat that process for all four cards. And then we can import them into the timeline. I will place them below the main card and label them a different color so they stand out. Let's also make them 3D by clicking the cube icon. And then I will move them all in Z-space a bit so they don't interrupt with the main card later on. Now we can start setting them one by one. I will start with the card 4. Let's move it on the top left corner. Let's put the Y rotation at plus 35 and Z rotation at minus 35. Let's move to the end, add two keyframes and set the Y rotation to plus 10 and Z rotation to minus 20. Now let's move the card 3 to the top right corner. Set the X rotation to minus 25 and Z rotation to plus 10. Let's move to the end, add two keyframes and set the X rotation to plus 10 and Z rotation to plus 20. I will put the card 2 in the bottom left corner, set the X rotation to minus 20 and Z rotation to minus 20 as well. Let's move to the end, add two keyframes and set the X rotation to plus 20 and Z rotation to minus 30. Lastly, let's put the card 1 in the bottom right corner. I'll set its Y rotation to plus 40 and Z rotation to minus 40. Let's move to the end and set the Y rotation to plus 20 and Z rotation to minus 15. Now you can adjust your cards as you want. I like them to be closer to the card, but you can do whatever you want. Now that looks good, but to replicate that cool wiggle effect we saw in the preview, we will use the wiggle position preset. Let's apply it to the card 4. I will put the wiggle speed at 0.3 and wiggle amount to 60. Now we can copy it and paste it on every card. The animation is great, but we only want the main card to be in focus. Let's make a new adjustment layer by going to Layer, New Adjustment Layer. Let's set it to a different color to tell it apart. I will place it below the main and above the background cards, and then add the Gaussian blur effect. Set it to around 25. That looks good, but our scene is still. So we want to add an animation for the whole scene. Let's start by creating a new null layer by going to Layer, New, Null Layer. I will put the layer below the adjustment. Now, we'll link all the background cards to this null. Let's make it 3D as well so that everything works. Now we want to add two keyframes for Z rotation, one at the beginning and one at around 1 second mark. I will set the beginning value at around -70. Let's select them and press F9 to ease ease. And now we can open the graph editor. I will use the value graph. You can copy me and make a graph that looks something like this. It might look a bit weird, but it will all come together later on. Basically, what we lack is a zoom for the whole scene. Let's add another null layer by going to Layer, New, Null Layer. We'll connect the previous null to it and also the main card as well. Now, let's add two keyframes for scale, one at the beginning and one at around 1 second 20 mark. Let's zoom out to 30% on the first keyframe. Let's repeat the graphing process. Select the keyframes, press F9 to ease ease and open the graph editor. Use the value graph and make a fast graph like before. That's it for the card animations. Now, we want to make a gradient using the same method as in the first scene. We'll go to pexels.com and look for a plant image. Then, download it and upload it to the timeline. Scale it down to 50 because it's 4K and then rotate it by 90 degrees. Then apply the Gaussian blur effect and set it to 500. Lastly, add a tritone effect and copy my settings. Set highlights to white, midtones to gray, you can copy my code here, and set the shadows to this cool blue color. The code is here. Now, we need to blend everything together with color grading. Let's add an adjustment layer by going to Layer, New, Adjustment Layer. I'll add the lumetri color effect to the layer. Let's ignore all the settings and focus on the creative section only. I'll find the preset called Blue Steel and apply it. Then, we can also decrease the intensity to around 60. Now, we need to make the beginning animation a little smoother. Let's add another adjustment layer. And on this one, we will apply the fast box blur effect. I'll set one keyframe at the beginning and one at around 10 frames. And set the value of the first one at 4. Leave the other as it is. And with this, we made this cool 3D scene only using Figma, Sketchweb and After Effects. Now you can maybe make an animation where you swipe these cards or something. But I didn't want to make this tutorial too long. But let me know if you want to see something like that. Let's animate this cool scene using a PSD we'll provide and a free script we made for you guys. This part of the tutorial will be mostly on animating layers and less about design. I'll also leave a free project file for this scene so you can check it out for yourself. But now let's start by creating a new composition. Let's go to Composition, New Comp, 1920 by 1080, 23 frame rate and 3 second duration. In this scene, I will start by importing the PSD file we made. I'll leave it in our Discord server so you can get it as well. Make sure to set the import kind to composition and layer options to editable layer styles. Let's click OK. Now we can drag the new composition to our timeline and start editing. Let's hide the hand for now. And then we can start with the card. First, let's find the elements of the card. We can open the compositions until we find precoms named 1 and 2. I'll set the anchor points to the center of both shapes. These are made in Photoshop, so you must set the anchor point manually. Now we can start animating the first shape. I'll add the rotation and position keyframes at the start and around 5 frames later. Also, let's set the rotation to be a bit shorter. The animation will be way better that way. Let's set the rotation on the first keyframe to -2 and let's move the shape up a bit. Repeat that for the second button as well. We'll use these keyframes to create a bounce animation. Now you can add the bounce expression the hard way with the expression panel. If that's what you want, I left the expression in our Discord. But we can do a bounce in a way easier and a faster way. Let's use a free script we made that can animate bounces in one click. You can find how to install it and the script itself in the Discord folder as well. It's completely free. Once you get it, we can open it and set it up. Now let's select the keyframes and click Apply Bounce. You can edit the strength here and even save the entire keyframe setup to use again the next time. I'll also move the second card a bit further, so it starts a frame later after the first one. Now our buttons look great, but we want to animate the whole card as well. We'll start by adding a keyframe for rotation at the start, and then another one 3 frames later. Let's set the value on the first one at -3, and leave the second as it is. Then we can animate it using our script. Now we must add some scale. I will add a different animation for the scale though. Let's add 2 scale keyframes, one at the beginning and one 2 seconds in. Then let's set the first keyframe at 175 and leave the second at 100. Let's select both of them, press F9 and open the graph editor. Switch to the value graph and then use a fast graph like shown here. That's really good. The last thing we want to do with the card is make it 3D. Let's pre-compose it and then turn the layer to 3D. Then let's add a keyframe for X rotation at the beginning and at the end. I'll set the beginning value at -30 and that will give us this cool rotation for the whole scene. That's it for the card. Now we're going to animate the hand. I'll turn it back on. Before we animate it, let's set the anchor point to the bottom of the hand and then move it so it selects the top button. Then we can add a position and a rotation keyframe at around 120 seconds in. Then I will go to the start and move it out of bounds and also rotate it a bit to get a better effect. Now we want to graph this animation. For the sake of the tutorial, I will use the flow plugin and do this in one click. But all you have to do for this animation is apply a graph like this to position a rotation we just animated. Once we do that, let's move the keyframes to the left like this so that our hand animation starts earlier. That looks good. But how can we make it go over the other two buttons as well? For that, we need a null layer. Let's add a null layer by going to Layer, New, Null Layer. Then let's parent the hand to it. We're going to use this null to animate the hand. Let's add a position keyframe at 1 second mark and another one at around 120. Then move the hand down on the second keyframe and repeat the fast graph from before. You should get something like this. And to make it go to the last button as well, I will add another null layer and repeat the process. Let's parent the first null to the new one. Now we can add a position keyframe at around 120 mark and at 220. Then just move your hand to the last button. Repeat the process from before using the same graph. This was really simple, but we got this amazing card animation. But as you can see, it's kinda rough and boring. We will add two adjustment layers by going to Layer, New, Adjustment Layer. Let's label them a different color to tell them apart. I will add the transform effect on the first adjustment. Let's add two keyframes for scale, one at the beginning and one at the end. Then set the value for the first keyframe to something like 115. That should give you this cool zoom out. But we also want to fix the animation at the start so it's not too rough. Let's add a fast box blur effect to the second adjustment. I'll set the first keyframe at the beginning and then one more 20 frames later. We can set the first keyframe's value to something like 7 and leave the second at 0. And now we got our cool card animation. The only thing we have left is to animate the plants. Let's open the plant composition. This process is really boring, but it's crucial. The first thing we want to do is set the anchor point at the center for each layer. To do that, we must right-click the composition, click View Options, and then check Layer Controls on. Now, let's select the anchor point tool and move the anchor point to the center of each plant. When we set everything up, we need to start animating it. Let's add two keyframes for position and rotation for the first plant. I'll set them at the beginning and the end as well. Let's set the rotation to 10 and then move the position down like this. Now we want to repeat the process with all plants, but choose different values. I will move this plant to the left and a bit down, and then rotate it by -10 degrees. Then do the complete opposite with the right plant. I'll set it to +10 degrees and position it coming to the right and a bit down like this. You should get something like this. But our animation is really slow, so we need a graph. I will use the flow plugin for the sake of the tutorial, but the only thing we have to do is add this graph to every property. It will take a lot of time, but you can go one by one. Once you animate everything, it should look something like this. Then we can move to the top plants. There are only two plants, and the process is the same as before. Set the anchor point to the center, and then add two keyframes for rotation and position on both layers. Then do the same at 3 second mark. Now I will animate the right plant to come out of the right side, and the left plant to come from top. You can add a subtle rotation for these as well. Repeat the process and add a graph like before. That's it for this tutorial. You can recreate these and post them on your profile and tag us on X and Instagram. We will repost the best edits on our profile. And as always, if you want to see more editing content, then subscribe.